Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the Two Blokes.
It is 7 minutes past 10 o'clock. This is normally where we have our, if you will, big ticket item in regard to our special guest. And we had a thought during the week that said, what have we got?
No, concentrate.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting a text put under my nose.
I wanted to see if you had the capacity to do two things at once.
I'm a bloke. Of course I can't. So we had a chat about during the week. We have had one or two folks say we'd actually like to know a little bit about the folk who present this program. So, Rob, who is our special guest interviewee today?
We have got a gentleman who is well known to the show. He comes on quite often. In fact, I would say he's been here 98% of the time that we've presented this show. He's a gentleman called Neil Butler, and hopefully he's going to be very giving of his time this morning. Neil, good morning and welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show.
Rob, it's a great pleasure to be here.
People don't know much about you. They might have formed an opinion of you because your
grumpy,
irreverent presentation style, but tell us a bit about how you got to Geelong.
That is a very obvious answer, isn't it? I turned left at the at the Corio exit. How did I get to Geelong? Well, I was born in Melbourne, just about a year before my first birthday, actually. And no, there you go. I'll admit it on the wireless. I was born in 1962 and lived in the inner northern suburbs of Melbourne for 4 and a bit years.
Doncaster?
East Brunswick.
Oh, okay.
In a house that I think we sold for a few $1,000 when we moved, and is now probably worth about $4.8 million.
Now, Brunswick's an interesting suburb because I remember going to watch the mighty Geelong VFA Roosters play in Brunswick, and I don't think I've been more frightened.
It did have a fairly interesting reputation, particularly the west part of Brunswick. And one or two of the more notorious criminals spent a little bit of their early days in that part of the world.
But you're in East, so you're away from
East Brunswick. We were closer to what would it be on the other side, Northcote side of Brunswick, in a street that most people refer to as Lygon Street, when in fact most of us call it, in that part of the world, call it Lygon Street. There's no emphasis on the gon. Did my first year of primary school at East Brunswick State School, it was in those days, and then in a reflection, I guess, of the times in the late 1960s, my parents decided that we would go and live in the outer suburbs of Melbourne where we could, spread our wings a bit, get a bigger house, that kind of thing. And we went to a place called East Doncaster, which now couldn't be any more suburban if it tried.
I was going to say how quickly things have changed around Geelong in the short period of time you've been here, but you would have seen that growth through the 70s, I suppose, of those suburbs of Melbourne that were once farmland and orchards that are now, as you said, completely engulfed in housing.
Oh, it has been phenomenal, amazing. For those who know that part of the world, if you go north up Blackburn Road, north of Doncaster Road, that area was still very much orchard when we moved out there, and a section of Blackburn Road was in fact a dirt road. And I went to school at Donvale High School, loyal and true, and at Donvale, Springvale Road used to be a one-lane road past the school with dirt on the, like dirt edgings like you see on the road out to Inverleigh, that kind of road. And now it's a 4-lane highway leading onto the Eastern Freeway, the main thoroughfare. So it's changed dramatically. I mean, it is a few years since that happened. Went to a school called Beverly Hills Primary School, and that has obviously got a couple of, pop quiz kind of answers. No, it's not in Los Angeles or Hollywood, not that Beverly Hills, nor the one in Sydney. But it was the genesis of a football club. The Fitzroy Football Club came out to that part of the world back in the old days when they had zones and said any primary school that wants to set up a local junior footy team will buy the jumpers. And that footy team became the Beverly Hills Junior Footy Club, which has spawned players as diverse and as talented as Paul Roos, Mark Murphy, and a bloke called Christian Petracca, who's having a few kicks at the minute. They've all played for the Hills, as has Sam Butler. Not the one that played for the West Coast Eagles, nor the one that's in the current draft, but my son, yeah.
Your childhood, did you have a lot of fun in in that part of the world?
Oh, fun. I remember fun. It was really funny because a lot of people, the old days of car, you get the stumps, the bin out on the road. I lived on a hill that was really good from one perspective because my brother's a lot older than I am. My sister's quite a bit younger than me. I'd be out kicking the footy after school myself, and you could kick it up the hill and it roll back down to you. It was actually good fun. But, you'd get out in the streets at night and you'd, do there was a sort of a flat street at the bottom, so there'd be the occasional game of cricket going on in the streets until it got dark, the sort of summer thing with the get yourself sunburnt and the odd bonfire on the block next door.
Well, you may have answered the next question already. You and I were brought together through a joint love of sport. So has sport always been a prominent part of your life?
I think primarily in the football season, not so much footy. I played a bit of school footy, and if anyone saw me play that school footy, you'd know why I only played school footy. But a great watcher of the game. I played a bit of cricket, and my greatest claim to fame in the cricketing world, and I've only told this 438 times, so let me do it one more time, was I played quite a bit of junior cricket against a kid called Dean Jones and dismissed him on a couple of occasions. He was a terrific batsman, and just occasionally get one to... that ball that he wasn't concentrating. But played a lot of cricket as a kid and represented the local club at Dowling Shield or whatever it was called, Hat Shield. Can't remember which one it was, in the Premier, the junior Premier thing for a couple of games. Played a bit of squash, but footy, the problem in those days, my parents were quite traditional and footy was played on a Sunday. Junior footy played on a Sunday, senior footy played on a Saturday, and we weren't allowed to play footy on Sundays. So I didn't get to play a lot of club footy as a result.
And this is why sport is so good, because you don't have to be good at it to be good at it. There's other ways you can be involved in sport, and we've been privileged, albeit in my case, latter part of the... Well, no, not really, because I suppose I've been writing about it for a while, but to be involved in other avenues of following sport has been a great joy, even if it's just being the passionate supporter of the Fitzroy Football Club.
Yeah, and that was one of the great blessings and curses of my life. Both my grandfathers were Fitzroy supporters, so it was passed down through the genetics. And I'm this year celebrating, and I use the word celebrating deliberately, my 40th consecutive year membership of either Fitzroy or Brisbane Lions, and being the only supporter, well, probably two or three of us in the school, in the primary recruitment zone at a time when Collingwood, Richmond, Carlton, Essendon were winning all the premierships. If you didn't barrack for one of those teams, you were a bit weird. And so when Paul Shanahan and Norm Dare came out to the school, they'd always pick the kid with the Fitzroy jumper on to come out and be the helper, so that was always good. So you were always very much feeling like you were part of the club.
The curse part, you were...
bullied and made fun of predominantly.
Well, but also, it was quite true, I think, there could have been saying about Fitzroy being everyone's second favourite team. Certainly loved the times when David Park and Robert Walls coached and you cheekily played preliminary finals and a bit of finals action and produced these wonderful players, of which the aforementioned Paul Roos was one of them. Had a bit of fun during those times. Did they counter the horrible years when you really struggled?
Oh, it's a bit like having a very nice bottle of wine when you've been drinking cask for your life. Yeah, absolutely, we love that. But going through primary school and high school, I was 17 when Fitzroy first made the finals in my life, and my mate, who was the other Fitzroy supporter at Donvale High School, I can remember going in on the Monday morning and seeing him. We both sat down as Year 11 students and cried, because our team had finally made the finals, and that also contributed to bullying.
Yeah.
Well, these two blokes haven't cried because their team made the finals. But yeah, and therefore, as many Melbourne supporters could attest, when your team hasn't won a premiership and you're 39 when you see your first one, and then you get another one when you're 40 and you're 41, that's it's just a bit more special, and that's why Carlton supporters and Essendon supporters who've seen them sort of scattered throughout their lives, yeah, whatever,
Yeah, now that's an interesting point. You sit on a line I would call between being quite a passionate supporter and a one-eyed supporter. Now, Fitzroy, Brisbane Lions haven't really done enough in their time to be like Essendon, Carlton, who are, it just happens all the time, and they get a bit arrogant, cocky. You seem to be a very cocky Brisbane supporter, even though your history suggests you haven't got much right to do that.
When you've been the first 2 years of my life, Rob, Fitzroy won one game, and that was against your lot actually in 1963. When you win 5 games, you can always see the positive. When your team's been through seasons where they don't win a game. And I think, one of the things that you and I both love about footy is watching the kids come through. And one of the things that Fitzroy particularly specialised in were kids coming through, because as soon as they were any good, they were then stolen by one of the other clubs with more money.
Correct.
So, watching the kids come through and getting a real level of optimism about it. So I wouldn't call myself cocky so much as optimistic.
Yeah, okay.
But boy, oh boy, when we win that flag, I'll be cocky. Don't you worry about that.
And you do give me the impression that you feel a little bit like the world's against you. Is that something that...
From a football perspective, or generally speaking?
No, from a football perspective, because generally speaking, you're not like that. But about football, you take on this different persona.
I think if you go and speak to a North Melbourne supporter, or you go and speak to a Bulldogs supporter, or you go and speak to a South Melbourne's now Sydney supporter, they'll tell you the same thing. When they were and I'm talking about people of our generation, I'm not talking about kids that come through now. We had a really tough time coming up through the 60s and 70s. The AFL, in those days VFL, now still VFL, he said through gritted teeth, they only wanted the high-profile teams to be on the TV. So it was an absolute celebration in our house on the 1 or 2 occasions every season where they showed 10 minutes of a Fitzroy game on the TV. And it was very much an us and them. And, you look at how the poor... a poor suburb versus a rich suburb. The poor suburbs, it's right for you lot over there. Well, it's a bit the same when it comes to footy clubs. And, I've got a mate who's a North Melbourne supporter, and when they won the flag, his family, they just, in 75, his family just went berserk because for so long they had been the oppressed and suddenly they weren't. So, it is a bit of us and them, but I'm a bit us and them against them too.
Yeah, you sort of got this listening to people like... Barry Davis, Doug Wade talk about that 1975 at North Melbourne, where they'd come from a relatively successful environment into this horrible environment.
Yeah. And
then they realised that the part they'd played and the joy of just wandering around and seeing 50, 60-year-old people just bawling their eyes out with sheer delight, they realised how good they'd had it. So it probably mirrors exactly what you're saying from a supporter's point of view.
Yeah, and when I can remember I could take you back to the seat that I was sitting in at 2001 Grand Final, albeit that it wouldn't be there anymore because they pulled the stand down. But I could take you exactly the spot where I was sitting to watch that. And I remember that at the end, I was singing the song, as you do, and I was singing the Fitzroy words unintentionally. And they then showed Kevin Murray on the screen, and he was standing up there singing, and I still get a bit emotional about it now. And I can remember Sam tugging on my sleeve at the age of 7 saying, "Daddy, why are you crying? This should be a happy day." And it was just amazing to see people just so incredibly overjoyed, just like the Melbourne supporters now.
Yeah. Do you think the people that you work with, and I guess you would have worked with a lot, as I have, that aren't into footy, do you think it's something that they miss, having those emotions?
Oh, undoubtedly. And there's a real push at the moment for kids to play the other form of football that they like to call football, which bores me to tears. And I'm sure they look at me and go, "If only you understood how soccer makes us feel."
Yeah.
Right. And I went to a game of rugby union at the Sydney Cricket Ground 5 years ago with some friends. It was the Waratahs playing against the Rebels because I was up in Sydney and they still come along and watch it with us. And there were 2 or 3 blokes in front of us screaming and yelling and jumping up and down. And I'm thinking to myself, how on earth can you get this emotional about this? When they're probably looking at me and saying, "How do you get excited about AFL footy?" It's just, it's just one of those things that's ingrained in you. Of course, people who don't understand footy miss out.
Now, there's a chance that you could have a career in politics, because I asked you a question 10 minutes ago and you still haven't answered it yet.
How did I get to Geelong?
Yeah.
I told you, I turned left at Corio. So I was a school teacher for 5 years and then got into the corporate world. And when I was in the corporate world, I spent a lot of time visiting regional Australia, and during that time developed a real passion for regional Australia. And I could happily be parachuted into any regional town for a week and just live there. I just think it's a great part of Australia. So many people miss out on. 90% of people, whatever it is, live in a capital city in Australia. That's just nuts. And I was talking to, name drop here, a politician, Dr. Ann Webster from the Mallee as part of Harder Day a couple of weeks ago, and spoke to her about this, and the interview's on the Harder Day website if you want to have a look at it. But she talked about people who have never experienced living in regional Australia think that it's some kind of hellhole that you wouldn't want to go and live in. You and I have obviously enjoyed that. So in my time at BP, when I was working there, I spent a lot of time in regional Australia, and I always decided I would end up living in regional Australia. But the kind of work I do in my day job requires me to be reasonably close to a capital city. Brackets not anymore now that COVID's been closed brackets. So Geelong just seemed like a really ideal fit. Ballarat, Geelong, close enough to Melbourne that you could actually still interact with Melbourne without living there. And I knew a few people down here. The weather was better, so Geelong it was. So I came here, 6.5 years ago.
And the other part that we're privileged about, and I don't think we appreciate it enough, is, and I'm lucky enough to be living at Inverleigh, but still have all of the good things about Geelong, but you're tucked away out there. But there's so many little Inverleighs close by as well that you can go out and get involved in communities.
Yeah,
and then when you get involved in football or cricket or netball or whatever the case may be, then there's the sport within these little satellites brings it a whole new level again. It's fantastic.
And I think we've talked about this a lot on this program. Remember when Leo asked us to do this for 3 weeks to cover for COVID? I reckon we're up to about it's got to be show 80. And you reckon we'd be better at it, wouldn't we?
Yeah, you would.
We'd think that. I think we've talked about this a number of times on this program. And, when I was growing up, my family were pretty heavily involved in a local church. And that was typically where you met your partner. My brother met his partner there. My sister met her partner there. And that was kind of the centre of the community. And, I lived in Charlton for a year up in the northwest, and the Catholics and the Protestants who would go out and break each other's necks during the week would then go out and play footy together on Saturdays. But over time, the role of the church has diminished, and less and less families are going to churches, and those sporting clubs in those towns have become the centre of the community, and they play such an important role. All the SES and CFA folks, they all go to the footy club or the netball club at the end of the day, and that's just such an important part of those communities. And we, obviously, you and I are privileged to have a radio program we can pontificate upon local footy and local cricket and local sport, because it is such a critical part of the community.
Yeah, it is. It is very important, and I suppose the premise of that question was to see, like me, you look at the wonderful opportunities that present because we've been involved in those sorts of environments where others that haven't been and never appreciate or understand it. But we're all different, and that's what makes the world go round, makes it a joyous place.
Oh, absolutely. And we're talking to Jane down in Warrnambool soon, and her big thing is she couldn't be any less interested in community sport, but she's heavily involved in community arts, and that includes both music and painting type, sculpture type arts. There's a visual arts, is that what they call that?
I think so.
And, equally well, there's that community as well. I guess that's a less popular version of that, particularly in some of the more regional towns.
And we've had John Didge on this morning talking about his fishing community that travel around, not necessarily together, but they come together, and there's great joy and happiness, and they go back to their normal lives. And again, when the fish are biting, together they come, and that is all good, because that brings about a good society when you start to care and share. And sadly, at the moment, maybe we're losing a bit of that. We need someone to let's have a big group hug, Neil.
Oh, well, yeah, but we can do that now, can't we? Are we allowed to? What's the wording?
I'm allowed to.
Today he hasn't got his mask on, folks, and I'd like to say he's a handsome man. I really would. Hey, we should probably take a break and take another song. We can
thank you for...
we can keep chatting after this if you want to.
Thank you for opening up a little about who you are, because a lot of people, who's that bloke you do the radio with? Where'd you get him from? But now they know.
They probably don't care anyway. Let's have a few more sponsorship announcements, another song. We'll come back and keep chatting if you want to, because we don't have Jane for another 15 minutes or so. We can keep
jolly good.
It's 25 minutes past 10 on a Saturday morning. This is the Two Blokes Chatting radio show.
Hey, we talked about the sport, question without notice, and the good bits that we remember as kids coming together and the fun of it. Has it been commercialised to death and ruined somewhat, or do you think it still has its same function?
Oh, my late mother used to always say it's not footy anymore, it's a business. It is a business, but I think the thing that saddens me more than I can put into words, he said, trying to put it into words, is that the globalisation and the commercialisation of sport. The AFL is trying really hard to keep up with American football, American basketball, English soccer, and it would appear, by looking at kids walking down the street, that they are failing dismally. And back when I was a boy, you would go out to the shops, or you'd wear your footy jumper, your Guernsey, not your jersey for those listening. But now you see kids wearing basketball singlets and soccer shirts, and you go, why would I want to follow a sport where if I want to see that person, the best I can do is do it on TV or potentially pay $10,000 for a ticket to go and see a soccer game? Some guy who has no appeal apart from the fact that everyone else likes him. I've met Kevin Murray several times, and that's an absolute thrill. Am I ever going to meet Ronaldo or Lionel Messi or LeBron James? No. To me, they aren't people. They're images. And to me, I just can't warm to it at all. And that to me is really sad that kids are more inclined to want to do that and follow sports that they never go and see rather than going and watch the footy at the local park.
Just on that theme, this is something that just popped in my head then, and I want to publicly...
That was the popping.
Publicly thank you for the work you've done in preparing Facebook pages and websites where people can listen to the stuff we've done in the past, whether it be here or on Sportsfix. But during that...
Or in fact, front page. During
some research on that, I listened to an old interview, which was 2018. You were in the studio with Josh Barnes and I back in the days when you can have 5. And we're also with John Burt and Cole Hutchison.
I remember that day very, very clearly.
And that is a perfect example of these two people who are now, well, Cole's probably mid-70s, John Burt's 83 or 4. We had him on recently.
It's great to have a couple of your schoolmates with us.
Yes. But talking about what sport meant to them then and the changes that are made, but speaking the same way we're speaking, and they're almost a generation older, in comparing it today, I think we've lost a little bit about what sport meant to them, meant to us, and I'm looking at that, and the involvements of media outlets in punching the American sports and the British sports because it sells cable television.
And there's only so much you can... Yeah, if you've got 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to fill, you've got to fill it with something.
So you fill it with that, and you get engaged in these other sports all around the world and these other characters and personality. And for you, as you correctly point out, for no reason other than someone tells you that it's a good thing to do, because you can't actually breathe it, feel it, touch it, so, as we can with the privileged position. Remember the AFL footy?
Well, Johnny Burt was telling us last week or the week before, whenever it was he was on, talking about the bloke that used to perform better in the finals because his boss used to give him his Saturday morning off when he was a bricklayer. Right? That's footy, isn't it?
That's footy.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Neither of us have used this expression yet, but let's use it. Back in my day, you knew the game was going to start at 2:10 on a Saturday afternoon. Why it was never 2 o'clock, I don't know, because it was never about TV rights. I assume it was for radio or something that they used to make at 2:10, and we always finish at 20 to 4, which give you 20 minutes to get the post match. And can you hear me, Harry? Oh, hello, Tommy Loaf just dropped in. Yes, Tommy. What do you got for us down there in the rooms? Got Bobby Skilton with us, Tommy. That sort of stuff now. Again, pet hate. They only ever interview the same 3 blokes.
Yeah. That Tommy Loaf thing, I had the Could Have Been's coffee table book out this week reading a story about Tommy Loaf, how they just set him up one day with this improved communication so he'll be able to hear you better, Tommy. So they've given him a builder's hard hat and have drilled a hole in the top of it and put this 3-metre Perspex stick with a little 3AW flag on the top and sent him out into the middle of the MCG thinking that he had this new whiz-bang aerial. And they're all laughing their heads off up in the stand. Funny stuff.
It is indeed. Hey, we probably should wind this up because people probably get sick of hearing about me, but we've got a few minutes before we need to have another song and another sponsorship thing.
And down to the Bull then.
But we've got, I think, 4 shows left after this, if I do my maths right.
Yeah, I think that was right.
And we are hopeful in that time to have the CEO of one of Australia's leading not-for-profits. We've got that lined up, we think. A person who could only really be described as a legend of Australian rules football. We've got him lined up. I'm on the trail of another one of the Australian music legends. So that'll take up 3 of the weeks that we've got ahead of us. And so the 4th week, in amongst all that, we will hear a similar kind of conversation. I might interview you, Robert Cameron, about your life and see if we can't straighten out the name. Are you Rob, Ron, Jeff, Brian or David?
Got another text this week. Hi, Ron. So it just keeps living with me. I think N and B must be close on the keyboard, are they?
Well,
I've never taken much notice.
They are immediately adjacent,
Yeah,
but not
that's
only
the
that,
reason.
N and B are two very fine combination of initials, if I can say so myself. But hopefully that's been interesting to people. I'd heard it all before, obviously, but it just gives you a bit of an insight as to who we are and why
who we are and why we're here.